was a bit overwhelming, like walking into that yard and like to actually see everything physically that we'd seen, from afar in so many pictures, and to finally meet so many people that I'd kind of known from a distance. I was working a lot with something called wapinol, which is it feels to me kind of similar consistency to Purple Heart. It's very hard, very heavy, very dense, very tough on tools as well. I spent a lot of the time that we were all down in Costa Rica making blocking that fits between floor timbers on top of the keel and then ultimately underneath the keelson. The SailCargo crew got frame 35 finished, and we all helped out with raising. Frame 35 was a solid Wapinol frame, so very, very heavy. We had a lot of people on lines, on backstays, on every conceivable sort of bracing line that you could set up for this sort of thing. It was hard work, but it went very well. I think they're up to like 39 now, I think, since then, so really flying along with that. And then another thing that I did a lot of work on down there was working on a small boat called Maracuya that was built for one of the classes that the non-profit sort of wing of the operation there, which is called Astillero Verde, built. My friend Kit, who's a very talented shipwright, did most of the work, the major carpentry work on that, but I did a lot of caulking and general, watertightness, remedial watertightness sort of work on Maracuya. And I also made a very quick and very dirty caulking wheel for rolling in cotton into some of the new seams. We also managed to fit in taking a little bit of time to see some parts of the country. We went to a place called Montezuma, which was very pretty spot on the Pacific coast of Costa Rica, and spent pretty much the whole time either on the beach or at hiking up into the hills to see big waterfalls and that sort of thing. So lots of wildlife, and recharged a bit and then went back to the shipyard. So one of the first jobs that I did when we arrived was fabricating a good-sized slide hammer for removing obstinate fasteners. I noticed on the breakfast table one morning somebody on the framing crew had made a rough sketch of a slide hammer, and I've used them a lot and even made a couple before, so I recognized it and just asked around and found out who wanted it and what for, and got to making it, because they're really going all out to get frames up, so it's hard for people to take time off to make the tools that they need all the time, I think. Had a good rummage around all the scrap piles and everything. Managed to get my hands on a pair of vice grips, which are I think worth their weight in gold in the shipyard. And started putting things together. Managed to find a nice big chunk of steel for the hammer itself, which was good, because if I hadn't found that, I would have had to weld multiple pieces of pipe together to get the weight. Or one idea that we'd had was to do a couple pieces of pipe and then fill them with cement, but then you have to wait for it to cure, and under impact the cement, I think, would come loose over time. So this was a much better solution, I think. And I think works really quite well. The main thing that I changed from ones that I've used before is the easiest, simplest way of attaching the shaft of a slide hammer to a pair of vice grips is to use the size threaded rod that threads into the adjustment socket on the back of the vice grips. So you take that wing nut or whatever it is out of the vice grips and you replace it with a threaded rod, and that's a very strong way of attaching it. But it makes adjusting the vice grips quite fiddly, because you then have to rotate the entire shaft, and also vice grips, generally speaking, all the ones that I've seen anyway, the jaws are offset a bit diagonally from the axis of the handle, which would mean that as you were using the hammer, you'd be pulling at an angle to the way that it was gripping, which it usually works, but it's awkward, and so I set out to do it better, and I think I may have actually succeeded in doing that. So I welded a little tab onto the back of the handle to bring the line of the shaft in line with the axis of the jaws, and by all counts it works very satisfactorily.
I'm going to weld the handles onto the hammer, like so, hopefully.
The only welder down there is a stick welder that runs on 110 volt household electric, which is obviously it works, but it's not something I'm particularly good at. All the welds on this are some of the ugliest I think I've ever made. Mostly fine structurally. One of the handles did actually snap off after a bit of use, which I'm still a little bit upset about. But for the most part, I think I pulled it off. It's difficult because it's a very lightweight machine. These little stick welders, and it's difficult to get the amount of penetration into heavier pieces that you would like, especially for something that's going to be used as an impact tool. But I think mostly pulled off. Anyway.
Ordinarily I'm mortified if anyone's watching anything that I'm doing, but right now I'm just like, oh,